Max just doesn't miss, does he?
The dream of Title 5 is alive for Max Verstappen. Max Verstappen wins the US Grand Prix.
This is where it's dangerous. He's not acting like a human at the minute. The two McLaren drivers are not free right now. They are weighted down with this looming battle.
Imagine, if you will, that you and I are running McLaren. Would we favour one driver over the other?
I'm so torn on this one.
Red Bull are street fighters, McLaren aren't, yet.
That whole repercussions discussion is one of the most bizarre and goofiest things I've heard of in professional motorsports.
Sprint pole, sprint win, Grand Prix pole, Grand Prix win. Max Verstappen and Red Bull are well and truly back. Welcome to Austin, everyone, for F1 Nation's review of the United States Grand Prix. I'm Tom Clarkson, and joining me in the paddock is F1 TV expert, six-time IndyCar race winner and recent Haas F1 test driver, James Hinchcliffe. Hinch, great to have you on the show again. First of all, what did you make of the US Grand Prix?
Well, I mean, as a race, you know, the 56 laps around the circuit were not the most thrilling Grand Prix I think we've seen in the last little while. That said, the results and the implications on the championship, wow, it's so fascinating, so interesting. The plot is thickening every single time we're on track, and it's incredible to see what Max and Red Bull are doing, and almost equally incredible to see the inability to respond at the minute from McLaren and its two drivers.
Right, so you think the title race is wide open?
In the last 4 Grand Prix weekends, Max has cut 64 points out of the lead. He now is only 40 points back, and there are 5 weekends remaining. It's a maths problem. And when you really dive into it over the last few, I don't think he's had the fastest car. I think he is exceptional. I think Red Bull has executed brilliantly, and I think McLaren have had some slip-ups. Some of it's circumstantial, some of it is self-inflicted, but it definitely feels like they are feeling a little bit of the pressure, both internally, you know, you go back to Singapore, and then externally, now with Max winning 3 of the last 4 races. But they haven't really had a clean Grand Prix in a while, and so it's tough to have had completely fair back-to-back comparisons between the cars. But I don't think the Red Bull is the quicker car at the minute, but I think it's close enough that if they miss a little bit, they being McLaren, Max just doesn't miss, does he? The Red Bull's gotten to a point where he can be consistently good with it, and he just doesn't make mistakes. So it is still going to take a bit of luck. It's still going to take some faltering on the McLaren side for it to happen. But, yeah, the numbers don't lie. It is very possible that Max could still win this championship.
Can we break down the 3 championship protagonists now, right? Let's start with Max Verstappen. As you say, 64 points out of Oscar's lead in the last 4 races. What makes this guy so good?
I mean, we've been having this conversation for 3 years now, haven't we? It's
Is he still getting better?
He's not getting worse.
No,
he's
not.
It's not a function of the car like we saw in 23. And even in 23, there were moments where you could isolate certain performances. Fine, he wins from pole and whatever, but there were moments within certain races that you could just see, my goodness, he is exceptional, even when he's out on his own, just in front cruising. And then we've seen him in enough wheel-to-wheel battles. We've seen him in enough high-pressure situations. He had no business winning in Imola. He had no business winning in Suzuka. He's impenetrable. I mean, he is so capable of extracting 100% out of his car at all times, in all conditions, under any and all circumstances. And I think that's what's so dangerous about him, because there's been plenty of times where he hasn't had the best circumstances, he hasn't had the best car, but he just gets the best out of it, and he's kept himself in this championship fight. He's kept Red Bull, it's a bit harsh saying single-handedly because Yuki has contributed some points, but basically single-handedly in the fight for P2 in the Constructors' Championship. He's 10 points behind Mercedes. They are 10 points behind Mercedes. That is outrageous to think about.
Yeah. The fact that he's done it before, 4-time champ against 2 guys who have never done it, how much is that an advantage? He seems so cool.
I think it's almost twofold. On Max's side, there's nothing to lose, right? To even be in the conversation, he has to just keep winning. And so he's got one goal. It's just, you're not protecting anything. You've got to be bold on strategy. You've got to take risks on track, something he's good at doing anyway, naturally does anyway. So he's driving pretty free and clear because he doesn't really have to worry about it. He was never supposed to win this championship. No one expected him to win it. He's just going to go out and win races if he can. So he's in a very good spot. And then on the flip side, you've got two drivers that are in their very first championship battle. And that just brings a completely different kind of pressure. You look at Max in 21 versus Max in 22 or 24 when the titles were a little bit closer. There were mistakes in 21. There were signs that he was having to manage some pressure in his first title fight that were different from, I think, what Lewis was doing in 21, having had been there many times before. So I think it's kind of two sides of it. You've got Max just so free and clear, and you have the other two feeling for the first time the weight of a potential driver's championship on their shoulders.
So when Lando Norris praises Max, as he so often does, is there some reverse psychology going on there, or do you think it's genuine that Lando thinks... I mean, if Lando's saying Max is so good, I feel don't boost your rival.
I don't think Max needs it. I don't think he cares what other people say about him, bad or good. Max knows exactly what he is. And what I actually like about Lando is the self-awareness and the honesty. Every driver, every other driver, every one of the 19 that are not named Max Verstappen probably think that right now Max Verstappen is the best driver on the grid. Lando's just okay admitting it. He's just okay being honest with himself and with the world.
Does that affect him in a wheel-to-wheel fight with Max, though?
I think it affects him in a positive way. And I don't think that's true for everyone. I think Lando's very unique, and what I've seen out of him over the last 2 seasons is an understanding of what Lando needs out of himself to get the best out of himself. Most drivers go to the pen after a bad day, grumpy, and coming up with excuses as to why it wasn't their fault. Lando's the first to put up his hand when he's made a mistake. He's first to admit when he's struggling. He's first to praise somebody else when they do something well. And that's not for everybody. Fair play. There have been enough world champions that have this ice-cold, killer instinct, emotionless sort of profile that it almost became accepted that that's what you had to be a champion. And I just don't necessarily agree with that. I think everybody is different. I think that does work for some people. But I think what's so unique about Lando is you've really seen him kind of come into his own and not be afraid to be himself, not feel forced to be this profile of a champion that a lot of people had in their minds. So I don't fault him at all because, again, I don't think Max cares. Whether Lando says Max is doing a great job or Max sucks at his job, it doesn't affect Max. So I don't think it's boosting him at all. And if it helps Lando, if being honest with himself helps Lando be the best version of Lando, then I think he's doing the right thing.
How crucial do you think his overtake of Charles Leclerc with 4 laps to go was?
It was huge. And what I liked so much about it was how it was executed from 10 laps prior. You know, he came out of the pits on those softs, caught up to Leclerc, couldn't get the pass done. 7 laps into his stint, he said, my tires are done. The team makes a conscious decision to back him off from that car, opens the gap to 2.5 seconds, cool the tires down, and once they were back into the window that they knew they needed to be in, he went back for the attack. So that is phase 1. That patience and that discipline, very impressive. To fall back enough to cool the tires, to drive in a way that you're cooling the tires without completely losing touch with the car you're battling, that's not easy to do. And then when it came to actually executing the pass, that Ferrari's very quick in a straight line, is very good on the brakes. It was tough to get by. The sort of failed attempt at turn 1 was actually inadvertently the setup that let him get it done in 12. So by making that move, throwing Charles off his game a little bit, he was able to be closer through that first sector, which meant that when they were out of 11, he was within close enough range to actually make it happen. So for me, it was a very mature execution, a very patient execution. And look, if we come down to Abu Dhabi and he's got the title by less than 3 points, you're going to look back on that and be like, wow, that was pretty handy he got that done.
I wonder how much, the 3 strikes for track limits were playing on his mind as well, right?
It has to, right? I mean, it's just such a common thing here. There's so many places that you can do it, and he reached that 3 strikes pretty early. So when he finally decided to make that move into 12, went all the way to the inside, offline, tires covered in marbles and dirt, and it's awful down there, and you hit the brake pedal, you are praying to yourself that you've got enough in the bag to control it on the exit and make sure you don't drop wheels. And luckily he did. He did everything that he had to do.
All right, what about the guy who's currently leading, Oscar Piastri? I mean, he's in a tricky run right now. If you look at the intra-team battle at McLaren, you'd have to say Lando's got the momentum at the moment. Where do you think Oscar is in his head right now?
It's tough to know because Oscar is such a level-headed person anyway. Again, good days, bad days. He doesn't fluctuate a ton. He maybe looked a little more off-kilter this weekend, in the car, out of the car, than maybe we've seen him. But you got to remember, it wasn't that long ago we were having the exact reverse of discussion, right? It was, man, Oscar's really on form. Lando's missing it in qualifying a bit, making mistakes in races. This championship's over. Oscar's got it wrapped. So these two are so close. It really is nip and tuck between the two each weekend. If one driver gets into a bit of a rhythm, gets into a bit of a roll, it looks like, oh, well, he's going to run away with it. We can get to Mexico, and Oscar could hit the ground running, be 2/10 up on Lando from FP1 through Q3, and lead from pole and win the race. That's not an inconceivable thing at all. So it's the momentum discussion is almost a tough one to have with these two because we've seen them both sort of ebb and flow throughout the season, and we just don't know which way it's going to go any given weekend.
But Hinch, I think it's in the context of Baku. I'm still thinking about Baku, where Oscar held his hand up and said it was just a bad weekend from the moment he landed there until he took off on Sunday night, right? I'm just wondering how that weekend is playing in his head. I actually don't think this weekend is as bad for him as it looked on paper. Last year he was 6/10 off Lando in qualifying, as he was the year before. This time it was only 2/10. It's just that it's so close that the optics look worse on the grid. What's his mindset going into Mexico?
I would assume that he's cut from this cloth of driver that knows you have to just treat each weekend in isolation. You have to forget what happened in Baku. Austin's done now. It doesn't matter what happened in Austin. His mindset should be, how do I win Mexico? Right now, today. And Sunday afternoon as we sit in the paddock, he should already be thinking about, okay, so what are we doing in Mexico to make sure we qualify well and race well? And I think he's experienced enough. He's won enough championships in the junior categories. He knows you've got to sort of just focus on the current weekend and not let any prior results, good or bad, affect what you're doing.
Support for today's episode comes from Square, the system powering, well, pretty much half the places you and I already shop at. If you've ever tapped to pay and thought, that was fast, it was probably thanks to Square. Whether you're selling cakes, crafts, or cutting hair, Square can help you run your business without running yourself into the ground. Because having access to the right tools is what makes all the difference. And right now, listeners can get up to $200 off Square hardware when you sign up at square.com/go/F1Nation. That's SQUARE.com/go/F1Nation. Square isn't just fast, it's smart and flexible. It accepts every payment method, one-tap, chip and pin, Apple Pay, and even online purchases. You can track your sales and inventory in real time, and Square's slick banking system means you can even get immediate access to your earnings. No contracts, no hidden fees, no complicated installs, just tools that are built to help you run your business with ease. I love it when I spot businesses using Square because I know as a customer I'll get fuss-free service. And if they've got one of their loyalty schemes in place, that's even better. It's a surefire way to keep me coming back for more. With Square, you get all the tools to run your business with none of the contracts or complexity. And why wait? Right now, you can get up to $200 off Square hardware at square.com/go/F1Nation. That's SQUARE.com/go/F1Nation. Run your business smarter with Square. Get started today. imagine, if you will, that you and I are running McLaren, all right? You can hear the Jaws music in the background. Max Verstappen's coming. Would we favour one driver over the other? We can't have them taking points off each other, surely.
I'm so torn on this one because the simple answer is no. The simple answer is, all right, Max has gotten too close. They realistically only need one, maybe two good weekends, solid weekends. They just need to beat Max on one or two more weekends, and it's pretty much out of touch. Like, Max has a tall order in front of him, certainly. So it's I want to let them race. I really want to let them race. They've locked up the constructors. That's the one that pays the money. That's the one that affects car development. Yes, it's a massive flub if they don't win a driver's championship, but I kind of want them to earn it on merit at this point. They've tried so hard to keep it even. Let them race. Let's see what happens.
Because you're playing the game against someone who has got the entire team behind him. You know, if Red Bull was saying let them race as well, if they had two competitive guys, game on. But you're not.
It's 2007 all over again.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
And, you know, I think the difference in 07 is it was a very contentious intra-team battle. I don't think it's there yet at McLaren. I think it still has potential to at least go more sour than it currently is. But I think you have to, again, I can point at things that stand out about Baku, that stand out about Singapore, and that stand out about here. That stand out about Monza as well, where you can argue McLaren didn't have their best weekends. So less than Max and Red Bull having the faster car, it's just kind of they did a better job. McLaren at the start of the year were executing very well. Yes, they did have a car advantage, but they were also just executing well. It's much easier to do when you have a car advantage, given. But they know how to do these weekends clean. And that's what they need to do again. They just need to really look at themselves a little bit, because I do think they can still execute at the right level. I do think their car is probably still a little bit faster. I think you have to give it another round, at least one, maybe two, before you try to make that decision. 5 weekends left, right? With 3 to go, if Max is still chipping away at it, it's within a race win. Yeah, I think you have to make that decision. But I don't think you do it yet.
And in that situation, would we back the guy with the points advantage or the one who's got the momentum? Because that's what you're looking at right now, isn't it?
This is why it's hard to back anybody. Because with these two, it's been so back and forth. And if you have, look, let's say today. Let's say they came into this Grand Prix and said, you know what, Max is on pole. He won the sprint from pole. He's getting too close. We're going to prioritize our higher championship position driver. Too bad. He was 4 places behind, 3 places behind. Lando can't help him. So I think they're between a rock and a hard place. Because for that to work, they have to be running nose to tail, essentially. Fine, you can send Oscar out second in qualifying. You can try and give him a tow at Mexico. You can do these things. You can play these games, sure. But in the Grand Prix, if they're not running nose to tail, which at the start of the year, that's all it was. They were swapping one position back and forth. They were always one apart. Now there's Red Bulls in the mix. There's Ferraris. There's Mercedes in the mix.
I'm always fascinated how pressure affects not only drivers but race teams. I was thinking that thought when the two McLarens collided at the start of the sprint. I was thinking that thought when the second pit stop in the race today was a little bit slow. I always think the litmus test of the health of a race team is pit stops, isn't it? A harmonious race team that's buzzing nails the pit stops. The ones that are a little bit tentative, feeling the pressure, make the mistakes. And we're seeing McLaren make those mistakes in the pit stops. They've pinpointed the fact that there's an issue with the wheel nut or something that they can't rectify before next year, so that might repeat itself. How much do you think the crash at the start of the sprint was playing on their minds going into the Grand Prix today? All the while, Max is, as you said earlier, relaxed, got nothing to lose, disappearing into the distance.
Yeah, a free driver is a fast driver, right?
That's a good way of putting it.
And the two McLaren drivers are not free right now. They are weighted down with this looming battle. And I think even Red Bull in 24 started the season strong, but once McLaren caught up, you started seeing their pit stops falter a little bit, right? They weren't knocking out 1.9s every race like we'd seen in the past. It's pressure's an interesting thing.
Hunter or hunted?
You always want to be the hunted because that means you've got the points lead, right? You always want to be passing is tough in F1. On track, in a championship, you always want the lead if you can have it. But it does come with more pressure, right? And it is a harder position to be in some ways. But you still always want to have that lead if you can.
Zandvoort wasn't so long ago. Do you think that's playing on Lando's mind?
Again, I really hope it's not, because it doesn't matter. It's done. You can't. I really hope that he's not wasting any energy on something he can't change and can't control. He can't learn anything from that scenario because he didn't make a mistake, and he can't change the outcome. If we get to Abu Dhabi and he loses the championship by less than 8 points, or whatever the gap would have been at the end of that, then you might look at it. But if you think about where we are today, and it kind of goes to the discussion of which driver do you back, the one with the points lead or one with the momentum. Had Lando's car not failed, right, he lost 18 points that day. He's only 14 points behind Oscar. So had he finished that race in second place, he would now be leading the championship. So if Mexico's the race where McLaren has to decide which driver do we back, had their car not failed Lando, you would be backing Lando. But because there was a mechanical failure, are you backing Oscar? It's just such a complex and difficult situation to navigate.
Which brings us on to the repercussions discussion, right? After their collision at the start of the Singapore Grand Prix, these repercussions that have been inflicted maybe on Lando, if that's the right word. They're being pretty cagey about what they are. I mean, I think we can say safely enough that they're not that significant. I think it's all about order in qualifying and things like that. But is that because they don't want to disadvantage Lando, but they want to slap his wrist?
I
just
honestly,
to keep Oscar happy, if nothing else.
I honestly don't know the answer to that. That whole repercussions discussion is one of the most bizarre and goofiest things I've heard of in professional motorsports. Whatever it is they're talking about, they should have sat down with their press officer at the start of the weekend and say, hey, just so we're clear, don't use any of these words. Don't mention anything that was discussed in this meeting. Just say, yeah, we talked about it and we're moving on. Because now all they've done is it's like, I bet they wish they could go back to Monza 2 years ago and never say papaya rules over radio. The number of times that's come up, the number of times I've heard it and I've had to say it, and I'm so sick of that term. Either publish them so we know what they are, or can we please stop talking about them? They're creating these ridiculous scenarios for themselves. And look, it's partly our fault as the media because we hear these things and we jump on it, whatever. I wish they'd never said the word repercussion without telling us what it was. Because I cannot for the life of me fathom what a race team could do to a driver. Let's say, quote unquote, was it a competitive disadvantage, whatever, however they worded it. It was some silly wording. I just don't know what that could possibly be.
There's a naivety, isn't there? I feel that compare and contrast the way Red Bull goes and fights for a championship with the way that McLaren is, right? They seem to create a lot of unnecessary noise around themselves that Red Bull don't. The veterans, the season championship protagonists, they're just... Red Bull are street fighters, McLaren aren't, yet.
It's a very delicate balance that they're trying to strike. And I honestly respect the intent. You have two star drivers. Two drivers that you want driving for you for the foreseeable future, hopefully winning races and championships for years to come. That does take a degree of harmony within the team because we've seen it go the other way so many times. I respect the intent, what they're trying to do. I think in doing some of these things and some of this kind of white glove approach, this handling it very cautiously, bubble wrapping certain situations, they've created a few problems that they shouldn't have. At the end of the day, this is a race team. Drivers are employed by the race team. You work for them. At some point, you have to be able to just sit down and lay down the law a little bit. And if someone's feelings get hurt for the day, so be it. A race team's a family. Families fight all the time. you hug it out next week and everybody goes on. So, again, I respect the intent. I think they've maybe taken the approach a little bit too far, and they need to back that off a little bit, stand up for themselves as a team a little bit more with their drivers, and find that balance, because they're close. They're doing a great job. They've wrapped up a Constructors' Championship. They've got 2 drivers in the fight for the Drivers' Championship. They're doing a great job. I'm not trying to say they're not. But there is room for improvement, I think, in how they're handling that approach.
It's as if they're trying to engineer the drivers in the way that they engineer the cars.
They try to engineer emotion, which is hard. That's impossible.
Yeah.
Cars are science. There's numbers, there's facts, and even then they sometimes can't figure it out, right? Human beings are very complex creatures. They are not as black and white as math and science. So it's a tough ask what they're trying to do.
I think the lesson in all this is that a race team doesn't want drivers who are so close in performance, right?
Ultimately, no, you're right. You want the best car, and you want a guy that's 2.5 to 3 tenths off the other guy, and off you go.
Brings home the points and lets the other guy do the winning.
Picks up the wins when the other guy has an off day or has an issue, and can support the Constructors' Championship with those 3rd, 4th, and 5ths. When you look at some of these strong teams historically, right, it is one guy that is the leader and one guy that's kind of 2 to 3 tenths off, who can still qualify in the first 2 rows, can be in the podiums in the top 5s, and collects those wins on days when your leader is off. It's your Schumacher Barrichello, it's your Hamilton Bottas. They dominated championships, drivers and constructors. It gets messy, and it's hard to keep the harmony. Look, how long did Barrichello and Schumacher drive together? A long time. They were at that team for a long time. Hamilton and Valtteri were there for a long time.
Do you know, it was 5 years for both.
5 years for both, and 5 championship-winning years. But then you look at Prost and Senna. Eventually that fell apart. Rosberg and Hamilton. Eventually that fell apart. So, historically speaking,
there's a lesson there.
If you have 2 number 1s, it is eventually going to end poorly.
What about Ferrari then? Charles Leclerc finished P3 to score his and Ferrari's first podium since Belgium 6 races ago, while Lewis Hamilton finished 4th. Think back to Friday, Hinch, when Leclerc had a gearbox problem in FP1 and they were nowhere in sprint qualifying. Fast forward to Sunday night, they've had a good weekend, a good recovery. Would you agree?
Absolutely. One of the best turnarounds I think they've had all season. Interesting that even Leclerc was surprised by the amount of pace they got overnight from Friday to Saturday. He was not expecting to be, I don't think, P3 in GP qualifying. But it just shows that, and look, we've seen it from Mercedes in the past, we've seen it from Red Bull in the past. Simulation doesn't always work the way you expect it to. In this case, it didn't work the way they expected to, but to their benefit. And I thought Hamilton had a great weekend. I thought, obviously, Leclerc did a great job to hang on to that podium. I like that they took a risk with strategy as well. They did something different without doing something ill-advised.
Hinch, what were you thinking when the tyre warmers came off at the start? Were you thinking madness, or that was inspired?
Inspired, because yes, they'd had a nice turnaround in form, but on race pace, we know Max was going to be quick. We were unsure of exactly where McLaren was, but it's still a McLaren, and if you look throughout the rest of the year, odds are they were going to be pretty good. I don't think their race pace was anything to write home about, and a podium was going to have to be achieved by kind of rolling the dice on strategy a little bit. So I think it was a very worthy attempt.
I was thinking, why is Lando Norris not on the soft tyre as well? I guess that's one of the knock-on effects of them not doing the sprint yesterday. They didn't have the data. They just couldn't afford to risk it because they didn't have the data. So to go with the slightly harder medium tyre, I'm guessing was the thought process there.
It makes sense, right? And it kind of goes back to when I was saying that you can kind of isolate a few different things from Monza, from Baku, from Singapore, from here, that shows that McLaren they didn't put together a complete weekend. Here, it is what happened in the sprint race, and not having a single lap on high-ish fuel, not getting to kind of figure out what to do with their race cars. They had to go in a little bit conservative, and that could have ultimately affected the outcome of this race. So, again, Max is doing everything right, Red Bull's doing everything right, but McLaren are also not having these flawless weekends. So I think for sure they had to compromise their race. having missed out with both cars on every lap of the sprint.
I can't help thinking what Lando might have achieved had he stayed in P2 at the start. I think he would have pressured Max.
Yeah, or at least been able to get around Charles early in that race.
Yeah.
He seemed very tentative on the brakes early on, and part of that could be those were the first laps he was doing with any amount of fuel in the car over 30 kilos. Race cars are very different when they have 110 kilos of fuel in them. And so you have to kind of learn. Even look at Piastri. Piastri was under immense pressure from Russell in those first few laps. Once he kind of got into his groove, figured out what the car was doing, Russell never had another shot at that P5 for the rest of the Grand Prix. So I think both of them had to take a little bit of time in the early stages of that race to feel the cars out. Had they been able to compete in the sprint race, it may have looked different.
What did you make of Hamilton this weekend? I've always thought of Austin being a Hamilton racetrack, right? He's won here 5 times. He's been imperious in the past. I'm thinking he came here thinking I've got him covered, him being Charles Leclerc, and he did early on in the weekend. Do you think he'll be walking away from here going, yet again he's done me, and I'm frustrated?
It's tough to know. Because it was objectively a strong weekend from him, certainly. As you say, he loves this track. I think you still have to take the positives away. I mean, Charles did an exceptional job. He does tend to do very well in these difficult qualifying sessions where wind's a factor, temperature's a factor, changing conditions are a factor. That's kind of what helped him get pole in Hungary, was that big wind direction change from Q2 to Q3. It was not too dissimilar to what happened here, and Charles was exceptional in those situations. So I think that the gap was as close as it was. I think that Lewis can still walk away from this one being, proud of the progress that his side of the garage is making.
He referred to it on Thursday. He referred to the last 5-6 races as test sessions. I'm not sure I believed him. I felt the garage might have been taken aback by that comment. We're here to go racing. Come on, man.
We've heard it from him before, though, haven't we? When these regulations came out in 22, he talked about sacrificing an entire season, taking massive setup swings where George was sort of staying the course and sort of keeping it more consistent. He was the one that was trying to influence future direction of the car and development by doing these crazy setup changes. Whether or not that's true or it's a cover for why his teammates beating him, I don't know the answer to that. Both are possible. But I mean, I could see it. Yes, you're there to go racing, certainly. But if sacrifice of a few laps in a session today to try a different setup and test something benefits you 3 races down the road and for the remaining races in the season, there's something to it. He still has a lot to get used to with this team.
Mika Häkkinen said in the build-up to this race, it's going to take him 5 years to get his head round everything at Ferrari. That's not positive for Lewis, is it? I mean, I've always seen Lewis as a guy who, that bit out there, and I'm pointing to the racetrack, he's not a man who needs 5 races, let alone 5 years to get his head around that bit.
I think it just kind of shows everybody how intricate a Formula One team really is. As much as it's a car with 4 wheels and an engine, it does go down to culture, it goes down to process, it goes down to approach. There's so many different elements other than just driving the car quickly. And these machines are so tunable as well, right? There are so many things a driver can do to get it to their preferences. And if he and Charles don't necessarily agree on approach or setup or driving style, it's going to be much harder to progress as a team. You're going to be kind of out on your own island, and it's an island you've never been to before, and you don't speak the language, so it's, I get it. You see, a lot of drivers, it's taken a bit of time. He does seem to be struggling more than, the other high-profile ones this year were Carlos Sainz. You had Esteban Ocon going to Haas. It's not easy. Ask those guys. It's not easy to make that change.
Carlos is an interesting example, isn't it? That podium back in Baku has opened the sluice gates, hasn't it? And now you really feel he's got his mojo and he's got his head round the Williams way.
It's funny because if you ask him, he'll say, no, I figured it out 8 races ago. We've just had some bad luck. He seems pretty strong in his conviction that he's been there. And if you look at qualifying, actually, he was. They were, I think, head-to-head going into Baku. But Albon had so many more points because the Sundays just weren't going. And he said we weren't executing. We weren't converting a decent qualifying into a strong result for a variety of reasons. His mistakes, team mistakes, circumstances, safety cars, whatever. So he'll tell you it's just, no, things are just going well. I haven't changed in the last 8 races. It's just circumstances are going our way now, which in racing there is an element of luck. But, I mean, momentum is definitely part of it. Confidence is definitely part of it.
I think Ferrari are going to go well in Mexico.
They historically have.
They've historically gone well. Charles said that after qualifying on Saturday, the car felt closer to where it was here last year, where, of course, they were 1-2 in the race here last year in Austin. And if they can get that same feel in Mexico early on, with that extra practice session, it's not a sprint, then I think that could be the time.
It would be great to see. I mean, if, one of the things he said post-race in the pen was we understand, different from qualifying, he said we understand a little bit more now of where that pace came from, but we need to really dive into it, Monday and Tuesday, and if whatever they found is applicable to Mexico, not every setup change is going to work for every racetrack, but if it was the kind of thing that is applicable at other tracks, then yeah, they're going to just start off, as you say, on a much better foot and then have a few practice sessions to really tune it in and dial it in, and it would be great to see them, being able to fight up front.
More to come from Austin in a moment, but I just wanted to let you know about the other official F1 podcasts you can listen to this week. Aston Martin's Chief Technical Officer, Enrico Cardile, is my guest on F1 Beyond the Grid. That's out on Wednesday. And the latest episode of F1 Explains is an Ask an F1 Driver special with Sauber's Gabriel Bortoletto. That's out now. Just search for F1 Beyond the Grid and F1 Explains on your podcast app. Russell now. Let's talk Mercedes. Finally, they announced their 2026 driver lineup, the worst kept secret in Formula One. What did you make of that? We haven't had a chance to chat about that.
I think somebody acquiesced, right? I mean, they had a stalemate for a very long time.
Was Hinch in the conversation after his test in the Haas? Is that what happened?
Toto was just waiting to see. He knew the day was coming. He was just waiting to see how my test went, and then said, "Oh yeah, no, we're not going there. George, you're in." No, the rumors are that it was over promotional days, media days, commitments outside.
Do you believe that? Or do you think it's about a man called Max Verstappen in 2027?
I didn't believe it at first. The more I thought about it, it made more sense. I never thought it was about money, and I don't think it was about money. I do think term was an issue, but the way that George is performing at the moment is exceptional. There's an argument that if you put Max as the top driver of the year, George is in the conversation for second because he hasn't had the car that Lando and Oscar have had, but he hasn't made a lot of mistakes. He's pulled a couple wins out when maybe they weren't expecting it. Either way, he's in the top. He's doing a phenomenal job. So if you fast forward to the end of 26, regardless, let's say McLaren or Mercedes has a competitive car, unless you see a massive improvement, and Red Bull has a dog, unless you see a massive improvement from Kimi Antonelli from year 1 to year 2, if Max Verstappen says, I'm leaving Red Bull, and Mercedes has the car to beat, are you going to replace George with Max? Would you not replace Kimi? George is still only 27 years old. I know people talk about Kimi being the future. I get that. Look at Hamilton. Look at Alonso. You could get another good 12 years out of George.
And that comes back to what we were talking about earlier at McLaren about having 2 number ones. I mean, Max Verstappen and George Russell. Now, that's mouth-watering for us, but might not be a long-term solution for them.
But what's interesting is Mercedes seems to have the same mindset as McLaren in the sense of they want the 2 best drivers, right? That's what they had with Rosberg and Hamilton. That relationship was contentious almost from day one.
Once bitten, twice shy?
They wouldn't have brought George in when Lewis was still there if that was the thought, right? They had a lot of faith in George. They believed that George could fight for wins. When George sat in for Valtteri for Lewis, he nearly won the race. right? His first time in the Merc. And so I don't think they went in necessarily thinking that he was going to play second fiddle to Lewis Hamilton. And sure enough, 2 of the 3 years together, he did beat him in the championship. So I don't think so. So the more I thought about it, the more I thought it really seems nuts to not be able to offer George an honest multi-year contract, not contingent on anything, not contingent on Max and whatever. If that's what he wanted, and maybe he didn't want that. Maybe he wanted the option to get out if the Mercedes isn't competitive. Because George just said he would drive for free if it was a championship-capable car. So these conversations are so intricate, and they're so specific to that situation. The more I thought about it, I'm like, yeah, you know what? These guys do work very hard. A 24-race schedule is grueling, and maybe he just wanted more time at home. So if that was the fight, but eventually, whatever the issue was, somebody had to acquiesce, because we had that stalemate for a long time, and now we finally have a deal. I don't know which side gave in. I don't know what they gave in on, but I think that Toto's the kind of guy that's got the approach of best car, 2 best drivers, let's go win everything.
That's one hell of a wage bill, though, isn't it? Verstappen and Russell.
It's outside the cost cap, and they've got a lot of money, so I don't think they're worried about it.
Hinch, what a wonderful chat. Thank you so much for coming on the show again. This is the driver of the day moment of the show. Before you give us your candidate, can we just have a look at some honourable mentions from not only the Grand Prix today, but the weekend as a whole? I mean, Tsunoda, Behrman, Hülkenberg back in the points for the first time since Silverstone.
All of the above. All of the above. It was so unfortunate what happened to Nico in the sprint after that brilliant qualifying. Incredible that he still hasn't made a Q3 in a GP format this season. Bizarre. But yeah, Sauber had pace. I mean, he was quick in every session this weekend. So genuine pace both out of him and the car. So great. Behrman to get points, especially after that botched attempt at getting by Tsunoda and losing a place to Hülkenberg as a result. But home race for Haas, and he so nearly got that last point in the sprint race as well. And Tsunoda, man, I mean, what a weekend. The way he navigated turn 1 of the sprint race was mega. To get points from 18th, nobody expected that. And I mean, he's on a good run. I think in the last 3 races, he scored more points than he had in the previous 12. It's not enough, but it's at least trending in the right direction. So yeah, definitely some strong drives there.
We've made a couple of references there to the start of the sprint race. I don't think you've given us the racing driver's view of the accident at the start of the sprint that took out Hülkenberg, both McLarens.
Alonso.
Whose fault was it? Alonso as well?
Nobody's. It was the fault of Herman Tilke and his designers that built this track.
Got to blame someone, right?
And I don't actually, when I say fault, I just mean they're responsible, but I don't blame them because that turn 1 is great and it has provided us so much action over the years. It's a racing deal, when you have tight corner, wide entry, so inviting, multiple lines you can take through it. Oscar couldn't have really done anything different. He would have known Hülkenberg was there with how wide they went, or could have assumed if he couldn't see him. There was no way for him to know that Alonso had dived down the inside of Hülkenberg, that they were essentially 4 wide at that moment. Lando, obviously, innocent victim. Hülkenberg was more defending against Alonso. Alonso had to go for an opportunity. That's what Alonso does. Everyone there was just being a racing driver. For anyone to have done anything different, they weren't doing their job. So I just think it was a racing deal.
Okay. All right, Hinch. So who is James Hinchcliffe's driver of the day at the US Grand Prix? You're pretending it's a close battle.
Well, it's
who else other than Max Verstappen is going through your brain right now?
So the only other one that's in my brain is Charles, because he's not driving a car as competitive as the Red Bull. He put up a good, honest fight with Lando. He kept Lando behind him on softs, which he ran for 20-something laps at the start of the race on full tanks. Brilliantly defended when he had to. It took Lando 2 cracks at it after the pit stops. Got a podium for the first time since Belgium, like you said. It's a good effort. The problem is Max sets his own bar so high, you have to compare Max to Max, and as far as Max drives go, this was a pretty average one, right? Because Leclerc kept all the competition back. That gap was up over 10 seconds, I think, by the time Lando finally got clean air. And it ended smaller than that. I don't know exactly how much, but I think Lando's race pace was quite good. I don't know if he had enough to pass the Red Bull. He said in the pen he did not. but maybe the strategy plays out differently if he's 2 seconds behind Max for that opening stint rather than 10. So Charles, fine. Max, obviously, is the driver of the day. Can we give honorable mention to Charles?
Yeah.
All right, we'll go
and
with
a very strong case you put there as well.
Put some
Hinch,
thought
I must
into it.
say. Do you know what, the thing about Max that I found so impressive is the metronomic consistency, right? When did he last make a mistake, an obvious mistake? I can't remember a moment.
I can't remember one that wasn't. I can remember some misjudgments, but not just an honest driving error. You know, like Mexico last year with Lando, that was a misjudgment. George this year at Barcelona, that was a misjudgment, right? But just a good old-fashioned driver error, unforced driver error, it's rare.
And the way Red Bull improved their performance after the sprint, he came out after the sprint and said, thank God it was only 19 laps because I wasn't happy with the tyre wear. Okay, how much pressure was he under today? Not much, but he was very happy after the race with the balance of the car. They'd obviously improved it. You know how Ferrari seem to not understand that car at all, the Ferrari? Red Bull really give you the impression they know how to make this car hum now, and that is ominous for the remaining five events.
I still think when the Red Bull is in its peak window and when the McLaren is in its peak window, that the McLaren is still a slightly faster car in totality.
Isn't that track dependent?
That's what I'm saying. In totality, if you average everything out over the season, or let's call it over the next 5 races, I still think there's an edge to the McLaren.
Over one lap or a race distance?
Yes.
What, both?
Potentially. In totality, if everything, because I mean, Lando's best sectors in certainly sprint qualifying would have been enough to be on pole. He didn't put them together. Max did. This is the difference. Up to Monza, the Red Bull setup window was so narrow. It was really tough to nail it. When they nailed it, they could do things like Suzuka, like Imola. They could have these good days. Now that they've made the window bigger, made it easier for Max to get the car into the window where he can do Max things, this is where it's dangerous. Because Max, with 90% of the car of any other driver, has a good shot at beating them because he'll get 100% of that 90% every time. Where others are they're human. Max he's not acting like a human at the minute. Drivers make mistakes. They are infallible, or so they're fallible creatures. But Max is just his percentage of unforced errors is minute in comparison.
How long do you think Max can maintain this level of performance?
It's a great question.
How long is that window when you're absolutely at your peak?
It's a very good question because I think for a long time, a lot of drivers would have said, you know, whether they would say it publicly or not, they'd go to bed at night and stare up at the ceiling and think, Fernando Alonso is probably a little bit better than me overall as a racing driver. I think for a long time, a lot of drivers wouldn't be lying to themselves if they said that at night. I think there's still days where you see that Fernando Alonso. I don't think it's as frequent, but he did it for a very long time. I know it's been over a decade since he's won a Grand Prix, which is baffling. But even in that, that decade in the interim, when he was in inferior equipment, you could still see these drives that were Verstappen-esque. I think he's a little more mistake-prone. I don't think he's ever been as mistake-free as Max is showing now. Max has just leveled up on even some of the best that have ever done it. But he could, if he wanted to, I think, keep this level up for quite a while.
Go on, put a number on it, Hinch.
Let me put it to you this way. I think that Max will retire from F1 before he starts the downhill side of his peak.
Because he's so self-aware, he'll know it's coming?
I think he'll just be over it and want to do something else. I think Max is going to leave before there's an argument that he's lost his edge and go do something else. I don't think he wants to be here till he's 40.
Oh, Hinch, I feel we could talk all day. But look, thank you so much for your time. It's been a really good debrief. What happens for you between now and Mexico? When do you head south?
Tuesday. We'll be on the charter with the F1 gang, and so we'll have day off in Austin, go to Mexico, day off in Mexico, and then get to work.
Brilliant. Well, look, thanks for your time.
Always.
Great to have you on the show.
Great to be here. Thank you.
Well, what a weekend of racing here at the Circuit of the Americas. And for more reaction and analysis from Austin, go to f1.com, the official F1 app, and at F1 on social media. You can also watch the highlights on the F1 YouTube channel. And we've got plenty more of these weekends to look forward to because Formula One has announced an extension of the United States Grand Prix, which will see it remain on the calendar until at least the end of the 2034 season. And before I go, we've also had the very exciting news that F1 has agreed a 5-year partnership with Apple to become the sport's exclusive US broadcast partner from 2026. It means that Apple TV will host every session at every Grand Prix. Select races and all practice sessions throughout the season will be available to watch for free in the Apple TV app. And Apple TV subscribers in the US will be able to watch F1 TV Premium as well at no extra cost. So lots to look forward to for F1 fans in the USA, including the release of F1 the movie on Apple TV in December. It's a good time to get Apple TV. Well, that's it from me. Thank you very much for listening, and we will be back on Thursday with our preview of the Mexico City Grand Prix. F1 Nation is produced by Formula One and Audio Boom Studios.